had maybe a naive hope that, well, once I published a book, there'd be a line of people at my door that wanted to work with me just because I was an author. And that really isn't true. But it has done, it's done a number of things from a marketing perspective, in that part of my marketing is doing podcasts like this. And so a lot of higher quality podcasts are excited to have on an author that's taken the time to put all of their thoughts down and gotten it in a book, and could get together enough people that they could generate bestseller status in some categories on Amazon. So like that's a mark of credibility, which has been helpful.
Today, I am thrilled to have Mark Osborne with us. Mark has 20 plus years of experience delivering hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue for SaaS tech and B2B services firms, leading to successful acquisitions and exits. He's also a best-selling author and an award-winning marketing and sales leader. Mark, it is such a pleasure to have you on this show.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course, Mark. So I want to get started with your experience of publishing a book, because we've never had a guest on this podcast who has published a book, who's a best-selling author. Can you tell us, briefly, what your book is about?
Sure, absolutely. I'll take it's a little bit of kind of my journey too, as a freelancer and a consultant. So I'll share that. For the last 10 years or so, I've been doing consulting projects on the side while having a day job and a more stable source of income. And this year, at the beginning of the year, I sort of made a decision to get a little more serious about building that practice. And I was discussing this with one of my partners who helps with doing fulfillment and some of the projects that we've worked on together over the years. And he said, you have an approach, a philosophy about why you do the things you do and why they matter and how to make them work. It'd be really valuable if you just wrote that down. Then when we bring in other folks, new hires, or even temporary workers, you can give them sort of a playbook, and then they'll understand your approach and how it works. So it'll give that sort of strategic framework. And so I was like, that's a really good idea. So I sat down and started writing it, and it really helped to really solidify a lot of things that I've done and learned over the years, but that maybe I hadn't named the process yet. It was just sort of, and now we do this process. And so then I looked down at this, and it was almost 30,000 words. I was like, man, that's about halfway to a book. I tend to be sort of long-winded. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to spend a little more time with this playbook and really make it a book that anyone could take and go and do on their own. And I enhanced that with some research, because one of the things that prompted me to build my practice this year is I've noticed that in the B2B space specifically, and this is a little more for kind of enterprise companies that are between that $1 million to $20 million a year in revenue, a lot of those companies were sort of cranking along, doing a certain number of things that were working. And then when the pandemic lockdowns happened, they kind of hit pause, and they maybe did some other things, maybe experimented, or maybe just sat on pause and waited on their marketing and sales activities. And then when the world kind of started going back to normal, they just pressed play again. But in fact, what happened during that time was that a lot of trends that already existed in the B2B marketing and sales landscape accelerated. And McKinsey Consultancy says that some trends accelerated by more than 10 years in less than 10 months. So trends around companies not involving vendors as early in the marketing and sort of the evaluation process as they did in the past. Trends around companies wanting to sort of keep salespeople more at arm's length and have less personal interaction with salespeople from B2B service vendors and things like that. And a lot of the data to sort of understand intent and market readiness and all of those things got much richer, and the technology to make sense of that data really blew up as well. And so companies that embraced that during that time frame really sort of lifted themselves head and shoulders above their competition. And so a lot of companies that sort of just went back to business as usual found that the things that they used to work just aren't working anymore at all. And so I really wanted to address that in the book. And so the book really talks about what changed, how the best companies responded to that, and then how you can take your company and sort of make that transformation in your business today. And again, it's written through the lens of sort of early stage, so past product market fit, so $500,000 a year or more in revenues, up until kind of $20 million or more in revenues for annual revenues. That's the lens, because a lot of those companies are dealing with really long, complex sales cycles that have a lot of different decision makers. So there might be a champion and a decision maker and a technical influencer and a lot of those things for sort of large average contract values. Like that's the real landscape that it's written for. But I've actually shared a lot of these concepts with other folks in the MyLance community and other freelancers and consultants that are providing B2B services. And they've said that a lot of the concepts really hold up for their business as well. So that's the book. And I'm going to give a free download to anyone in the community that wants it. All they got to do is go to modernrevenuestrategies.com/free download. And they'll get the book. And with the book comes a number of templates and frameworks that they can use to sort of implement the recommendations from the book. And there's even sort of a video series that goes into deep detail on things like creating a positioning strategy and identifying your ideal customer profile, your buyer personas, and then how to sort of take that to market and sort of identify your customer journey so that you can find ways to grow without spending money in advertising.
I love this. I love this. I love this introduction to the book and what you've done here, Mark. What's the name of the book again? I'm sorry, I missed it. Sure.
The title is Are Your Leads
Killing Your Business?
Which
really
is a little bit surprising of the title, because most businesses are like, I need more leads. But one of the things that I saw as part of analyzing those best companies versus those worst is with this obsession with the quantity of leads, a lot of companies are missing the best quality leads, and they're giving the same level of attention to every lead. But we all know that 80% of your revenues comes from just 20% of your customers. That's sort of that Pareto principle that always plays out. And so you need to really focus your 80% of your effort on those 20% of customers. Otherwise, your competitors are. And so when your competitors are pulling those best opportunities out of the marketplace and leaving you basically with the table scraps that are left over, you wind up with customers that don't really see the value in the type of solution that you provide. And so as a result, they negotiate discounted rates because they don't really see the value to begin with. And then they don't really understand your vision for why you solve the problem in a certain way. And so they require a lot of customization and a lot of hand-holding and custom work because they're not really aligned with your business. And then ultimately, they're not willing to go out and be a testimonial for you or provide referrals, and they churn. They don't renew their business or grow with you. And so they pulled you further behind where you know the market is heading, where your product vision wants you to take your solution, and further behind your competitors who are doing a better job at pulling in those best leads. And so what we really sort of built the book around is building systems that attract the right prospects, then accelerate them through the sales cycle, and then activate those clients for renewals, upsells, and referrals. And if you don't have those systems in place, then you're going to be sort of left with the table scraps from the leads that other businesses actually sort of say, no, thanks, we don't want your business. And then that sort of pulls you further behind the marketplace.
It's really interesting. What's especially interesting is that you aren't an author. You've never like considered yourself a potential author, right?
So I mean, I do write articles and do webinars. So I've done a lot of sort of public speaking and thought leadership in the marketplace before. And I will say, like, I have wanted to write a book for a long time on the marketing space. In fact, I had written a lot of a book around sort of using customer data. So really sort of granular analysis of, customers using cookies and a lot of other personally identifiable information, because 10 years ago, that was the direction everything was heading. But when the Cambridge Analytica scandal broke out and became really concerned with privacy, that totally changed the direction that marketing was heading. And so I had to sort of throw that book out. And this one was sort of a fresh start.
Got it. Got it. Like, this is your first book, right?
It is.
Okay. Like, for the rest of this interview, I would like to go behind the scenes of publishing this book and how it helped you like produce second order effects beyond just giving you revenue from sales of the books. So
Sure.
yeah, so tell me first, like, what is the process for getting a book published? I mean, one day I'm writing like a guide, a playbook, and then I realize that okay, maybe this playbook is too long, and I have something that could be made into a book. Then what is the next step there?
Sure. So there's a number of routes to go. And the right route for you will be different than the right route for me. The route I chose was the one that sort of I could put more sweat equity in instead of sort of spending money. And it was really sort of designed. The book is designed as a calling card for my business, but not its own sort of revenue stream. And so what I really wanted was sort of two things out of the book, and I got some added bonuses. The first is I wanted the credibility of being a published author, and so you can self-publish on Amazon. There's a number of resources out there that will to sort of guide you on how to do that. There's a great one called Kindlepreneur. That's a website, and I'm not getting any affiliate or anything, but I would definitely recommend looking into that. There's a whole
Is that what you
community.
used?
I used, that was one of the things. There's a whole
Right.
community of people that publish a book a month and
Okay.
create a lot of little income streams from those books to sort of build their passive income. And so they've learned a lot of tips and tricks, and they sort of share those in that community. So you can certainly sort of pull that in for your business. There's a number of different services out there that will coach you through on how to write your book. And the Mike Shreve, again, I'm not getting paid anything, but he's got a book called the One Book Millions Method. And it's a pretty good book on, sort of how to create some authority and differentiate yourself as an author, and then use that to build a consulting practice. There are other great providers out there as well that I took bits and pieces from. And I sort of had maybe a naive hope that, well, once I published a book, there'd be a line of people at my door that wanted to work with me just because I was an author. And that really isn't true. But it has done, it's done a number of things from a marketing perspective, in that part of my marketing is doing podcasts like this. And so a lot of higher quality podcasts are excited to have on an author that's taken the time to put all of their thoughts down and gotten it in a book, and could get together enough people that they could generate bestseller status in some categories on Amazon. So like that's a mark of credibility, which has been helpful. It's also been helpful, the imposter syndrome that all freelancers deal with and have, to sort of, the past year of building my business and practice. There have been certainly setbacks, but to be able to say you published a book, and that was the thing that I've wanted to do for years, and that I can take some pride in, and so that helps sort of re-energize things. But I would sort of advise anyone out there that's listening, that's thinking, well, once I get that book, it's all easy street from there. That's not really true. Like, it's another tool in your toolkit, but you've got to still put that tool to use. You got to go out and promote it. You got to do podcasts, things like this. Just launching it on Amazon and even achieving, bestseller status through through some marketing promotions isn't going to sort of create a line of people to come to your door. But I've certainly played around with, advertising within Amazon to drive sales of the book. The problem with that is you don't get a lot of information about the people that buy your book on Amazon, so you can't do a lot of follow-up marketing with them. I have not gone the route of, sort of and there's a sort of a known thing of like a book funnel where you buy a lot of ads to reach a really wide marketplace with the book. And then once you get them to, buy the book for $6, then you sell them a course, and then you sell them the consulting. And the reason why is my customer that I really want to work with is the CEO of a $2 million a year SaaS company that has been running his marketing, hired a salesperson, but hasn't brought in a CMO yet. And I want to be his fractional CMO. That's where I add value, and that's who I want. That person doesn't have time to read a book. He wants to just hire someone to do it. And so me buying a bunch of ads to sell him a book isn't necessarily the right path to bring them into my value ladder, if that makes sense.
Okay, so this is also interesting. I have so many follow-up questions. I'm worried that we may not
No
be
worries.
able to go through all of them. But I'll start with the thing that you said towards the end, which is that creating like a book funnel isn't the path to getting to your ICP. Then what is the path that you found was better suited for your ICP?
Yeah, so people do business with other people they know, like, and trust, and that's sort of a real rule, and we forget in the B2B environment sometimes that it's not all a logic-based decision. It's also some of it's an emotion-based decision. And so building systems that allow me to build some rapport and credibility with that CEO, whether it's having a conversation with them that's not about me selling them something, but more about, maybe it's about the book, or maybe it's about a book they want to write, or something along those lines, or just sharing content from the book because of, in response to a post they made on social media or a question they asked on social media. That's not and now hire me to do the rest of it for you, but instead it's just, here's free resources for you, and really sort of approaching it with a mindset of generosity is something that has worked a lot better. And the other thing too is that the book does a good job of sort of, if they go to check me out, it makes it pretty clear, well, I'm not just a guy who is sitting in his mom's basement and decided yesterday that I'm now a marketing consultant. I know enough to put it into a book and to get it published, and then sort of those things, they give some credibility, but it's just another data point as they evaluate. I've got thousands of options of fractional CMOs or consultants or agencies that say they can help me. Why should I choose this person? Some of it is sort of defined in the approach that I lay out in the book. They can read it or read the first chapter and be like, this makes sense to me. This sounds like the kind of person I want to work with, or not. And I would rather have, from that idea of attracting the right prospects, I'd rather have people that resonate with my approach than people that don't. And that's something, as we were chatting a little bit before this, and I said I would share for other consultants or freelancers out there that are thinking about writing a book to launch their practice. One of the things that I have learned so much from just in the process of writing the book is crystallizing my point of view to where maybe today my point of view is slightly different than it was when I was writing the book, just as I've gone out and talked to people about it and implemented it in businesses more and more. And so that, like, if I had it to do over, I'd probably write a slightly different book, but that's the opportunity for book number 2.
I like that. I have a couple more questions about the book writing process, after which we'll be moving on to how you're marketing your services and diving deeper into that. So I wanted to talk about the investment that it took from your end to create this book, both the time investment and the capital investment. So approximately, like, how many hours would you say you've put in to write and publish this book?
Well, I mean, that's hard to say because it's built on strategies, methodologies, tactics, and insights built over 20 years of working 60-hour weeks. So
Okay,
it would be
fair.
really hard to say now. And then,
But if we wanted to count, like, the time that it
sure,
took for you to, go and sit down and write those, say, 30,000, 60,000 words, like,
yeah.
what would that time frame be?
Um, Again, your mileage may vary. I'm a pretty, and I tried lots of different tactics. There are tactics of record yourself speaking and then have that transcribed and then edit the transcription. I tried some of that. I didn't love it. There's another to just, bang out. And then there's definitely true that you write during one portion and then you edit during another portion of the process. You don't want to write and edit, write and edit, write and edit. You want to get it sort of the raw materials, the building blocks, if you will. Um, and then edit and sort of carve and craft and sculpt that. And then the other also say, I think it was Abraham Lincoln who said, if I had an hour to chop down a tree, I'd spend 45 minutes sharpening the axe. And that's definitely true from getting your thoughts together and organizing them, and then really thinking through what's the logical linkage and what's the supporting evidence that you want to use, like going through that thinking exercise up front before you just start banging fingers on keyboard. That's really important. And so I probably did the whole thing in about 3 months,
Mhm.
where about the first month was spent researching how I wanted to organize it and coming up with some frameworks that made sense, and doing some actual research, because I use a lot of citations of academic papers and stuff in my book to sort of show that it's not just my opinion. And then probably the next 30 days was focused on pounding out a really large volume of content that I could then edit. And then the next 30 days was focused on editing that. Now, I'm a prolific sort of writer. I can write really fast, and I write a lot as part of my work anyway, and writing briefs and writing reports for people. And so that might take someone else twice as much time. But I did that all on my own. And then I paid my sister is a copywriter and an editor, so I paid her to edit for me. I also paid another external editor that came recommended from someone else who had published. They weren't as good as my sister was. And then my wife is a graphic designer, so she worked with me on some of the imagery for both the cover and other things, and so that helped there. So again, a lot less expenditure than other people would have done. I invested in courses from Kindlepreneur and other folks to learn how to do things myself rather than sort of paying someone else to do it. There are companies that you can just give them $100,000 and walk away, and then you'll have a book. I spent much less than that. Like I probably all
Oh,
told spent less than 2,000 an actual
oh,
hard cost investment.
right. That is incredible. I love that you basically employed your household in the production of this book. That
Well,
is
I'm
just
lucky that I
amazing.
have sort of best in class providers in my personal network.
Yeah,
So
that is incredible. This is very interesting actually, because the listeners who may want to be, you know, I have definitely talked to some of the members of the community who have been interested, who have been toying with the idea of publishing a book to build a thought leadership to help their consulting business. And your experience of, you sharing your experience of publishing this book, like even if it took you 3 months and it would take them 6 months, like it still gives them one anchor point, and they can then think through from there. So thank you
That's
so
it.
much for sharing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to the next segment of the interview where can you tell me a quick dive into a recent project that you did for your consulting business?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we really focus on is sort of creating systems. And we have a sort of a statement around here that systems set you free, because a system allows you to sort of be your best self all the time. And in fact, it allows you to replicate your best self so that someone else can follow your system. And so particularly for, early stage companies or sort of founder led or individual solopreneurs, the building systems is really valuable. And so we have a system that we use for helping our clients identify, is their biggest need around attraction systems? Do they need to attract more of the right prospects? Is it around acceleration systems? Do they need to do a better job of accelerating opportunities through the sales pipeline, from identifying when they're really ready to be worked and who their sort of best customers are, and how they can do that better, faster, and more reliably? Or is it around activation systems? So how do they activate their best clients to bring in more from renewals, upsells, referrals, testimonials, all of those things? So we do a diagnostic with our clients to identify which of those three areas is the biggest opportunity for growth. And that's part of how we have what we call our 10x ROI B2B growth guarantee, which is essentially, if we can't find an opportunity to deliver 10x your investment with us, we generally will sort of say, maybe we shouldn't work together. But because these systems have a lot of sort of downstream impacts, it's pretty easy to find where an investment with us will have a 10x payoff within 90 days. And oftentimes we see our clients double their revenues in that amount of time. But so first we sort of diagnose the system, and then we look at what are your current assets that you have. Maybe not all of them are being leveraged. And so, for example, do you have people that could be brought to bear? We tend to approach our projects really as a fractional CMO, not as a consultant or an agency. And the difference there is, as a fractional CMO, I want to enhance your core capabilities and build your sort of competitive differentiation, your really competitive advantage. And that doesn't come from me going off in a corner and doing it and then coming back and saying, here it is. And if you want it again next month, you got to pay me again, which is how consultants and agencies oftentimes sort of structure their business. I instead want to say, okay, I'm going to walk you through the process of building it up, so then you can do it yourself next month. And in fact, I'll help you recruit, hire, and train the right people as that makes sense for your business, so that you can sort of continue to grow. And eventually I'll work myself out of a job. But so we recently did a project with a company that they are about 8 to 10 years in their process. And as is typical in companies at about that stage, they've spent the first part of their life just bringing in new clients, and again, chasing that quantity of leads. And then they got to where they focused on, all right, do a better job at selling those clients. And so they improved their sales systems. So they built those attraction systems. Then they built those sales systems. And now they're like, man, we're not getting, we're scared about the renewal conversation. We're scared about the upsell conversation. We really need systems that will help us get more out of the attraction systems and the acceleration systems we've already built. And so we did a process of, again, diagnosing where are their gaps. And one of their gaps was in training. And so we put together and delivered training for their teams on how to be more confident going into a negotiation, how to understand your client's best alternative to negotiated agreement, and just sort of built a lot of best practices. around so they could be more confident in those renewal and upsell conversations. And then also built in systems within their business so that they were automatically advising clients of, hey, there will be a 5% increase on this contract in 12 months. If you renew now for 18 months, I can make it only 3%. And so that they're starting those conversations earlier and then giving a benefit to the client at the same time. And then also, using contract negotiations as an opportunity to say, hey, if you want to extend for longer, I can provide a discount. Or if you want to expand your services with us, I can provide a discount. And starting these conversations earlier so that it's not the last week of the contract and what if we lose our biggest client, what's going to happen? And so really sort of, again, just creating these systems that allow them to really grow that portion of their revenue in really thoughtful ways. That I talk about, revenue systems set you free. They set you free from worrying about, being your best self, but they also set you free from a lot of sort of strife and just sort of conflict within your teams because, well, if the customer success team can't get their renewals, well, then sales is going to look at them like they don't know what they're doing. And marketing is going to say, oh, why are we bringing in all these leads if you've got a leaky bucket and you can't keep the accounts inside? But instead, we work to sort of bring the marketing, sales, and customer success teams together to create all three of those systems. So they're then all collaborating on what's the best way to do this. And then if it doesn't deliver the results they're looking for, they can work together on improving the system instead of blaming a particular person, saying you did a bad job. Instead, it's, well, this system we all created let us down. How do we improve this system so that we get the outcomes that we're looking for?
I like that. That is very interesting, again. So I noticed that you mentioned you were speaking in the third person. So we have a team working with you in your consulting business?
Yeah, so the team sort of tends to vary based on the projects. And so I've got people that I've worked with over the years that I know are good at a particular thing or have some specific bandwidth at the time. And so then I can bring them in based on the needs of the project, which is typically how I do it. I've worked with, sort of virtual assistants offshore, and I've also worked with sort of people local to me and people on site. And there's some push and pull. And again, the more you can create a system, the easier it gets to bring in others that maybe don't have to have the same level of expertise or knowledge that you have in order to deliver the same results.
Let's speak about this a little bit, because a lot of the consultants in our community, they're struggling to bring on other people into their consulting business, and they have no idea how to onboard, let's say, a virtual assistant into their business or how to get help. So what is the system that helps you do that?
Yeah, so there's a great book. Again, I'm not being paid anything. I just think it's good content by a guy named David Jennings. It's called Systemology. And he talks about sort of defining a critical client flow and then using that critical client flow as a way of identifying, well, where are the most important sort of checklists to deliver the outcome that you care about. And, a system is really just a set of instructions that delivers a reliable outcome. And so sort of working through and thinking about what is that critical client flow. We do it focused really on revenue, but there are operational systems that you should develop too. And, accounting and finance and back office systems that make sense as well. But I always really encourage, CEOs or, founders, solopreneurs, you can't abdicate that stuff. Like you have to, even if you hate accounting, you have to know it well enough to know the system. And then once you build that system, you can hand it to someone else who can then bring in their expertise and make that system better. But then you understand it enough to where you're not getting taken to the cleaners or failing to pay your taxes. And so you're going to have some liability at some point in the future. But it's really sort of, and these don't have to be like these, overbearing, like McDonald's that has exactly a dime-sized piece of ketchup and a dime-sized piece of mustard. Like it doesn't have to be like that. It's really, what are the 3 to 5 things at each critical juncture that are necessary to get the quality of outcome that you care about? Just capturing that goes a long way towards building those systems.
Like this. And we will link to all the resources that you've been talking about in the show notes so the listeners can have an easier time finding them online. So if you're listening, just visit the show notes of wherever you're listening to the podcast and you'll find all the links to the resources that Mark has mentioned. All right. Next question, Mark. I want to ask you, how do you get consistent lead flow for your business? You're obviously like an expert at generating leads and creating business for other B2B companies. So you're yourself like running essentially a B2B consulting business.
That's
So
right.
how do you apply these lessons to yourself?
So the real key to consistency is diversity. And so one of the sort of measures that we use for sort of measuring the health of a particular company is there's a couple related to this lead flow. The first is that 30% of your volume of leads should come from referrals. And so if you don't have referral systems in place to generate at least 30% of your leads coming from referrals, there's an opportunity to improve that through creating these activation systems for activating your existing clients for more referrals. The other thing that we say is less than 50% of your leads should come from any one source. So if 80% of your leads are coming from referrals, that's probably a bad thing. That means that you're not really activating the market of sort of strangers. You should be if you want to achieve growth. And then, businesses are like sharks; they have to move forward or they die. And so we use those sort of two pieces of measure to say, like, do you have a healthy, sort of lead flow? Or is less than 50% of your business coming from any one channel, and is at least 30% of your business, your leads coming from referrals? Those are two great heuristics. Another couple that we'll use is if you think about your cost to acquire a customer, or CAC, the rule of thumb that people typically use in a SaaS business, and I find that this is true for sort of any ongoing sort of service in the B2B space, is your CAC should be sort of less than 30% of your customer lifetime value, and that's the sort of the model that people will use to say, like, am I spending too much to acquire a customer? So if any one channel, the cost to acquire a customer from that channel is more than 30% of the lifetime value of that customer, it's probably not a great channel. And so you should look for other channels to offset the volume there. And then the other thing that we say is for companies that they don't have a really good picture of their lifetime value yet because they're too early, is what's the first year's revenue from that customer? And so your cost to acquire the customer should be equal to or less than the first year's revenue that you get from a customer of those first 12 months. So using all of those diagnostics gives you a real data-driven framework for, man, do I have a good set of attraction systems? Am I really bringing in the right customers? And using those as certainly targets is key. Now, for consultants in the sort of freelance space, how do you do that? The real answer is, people do business with others they know, like, and trust, and so you have to create systems that bring in more people that know, like, and trust you, and activate the people that already know, like, and trust you, and make sure that you're reminding them of sort of the solutions that you provide. You've probably all seen the billboards and gotten the flyers and gotten the phone calls from the real estate agents. And that's because people forget what you do, every 90 days, or there's some statistics that real estate agents do like that. And so if you're not reminding your network that you solve these types of problems for this type of customer, then they've forgotten every 90 days. And so when they're meeting someone that they would gladly make a referral on, if only they could remember that that's what you did, if you haven't reminded them in some way in the last 90 days, they've forgotten. And so it comes down to, how do you do that in less obtrusive ways? By sharing good content, by being generous and offering free diagnostics for companies, or we'll we'll audit your systems and find ways that you could sort of improve it. Think about things that you can do at scale that aren't too expensive for you, but that then give you an opportunity to sort of create those reminders. And then that same kind of content can be used to expand your network of people that know, like, and trust you, because you can find people that are having conversations about topics that you're knowledgeable about, and you can give them free resources to expand those conversations, so that they then now know, well, that guy really, or that gal really gave me some really good insights on this particular space. Next time I need to buy something in that area, I'm going to ask them if they know someone that I should talk to. And that gives you an opportunity to sort of build that out.
I like that. I think this is such an action-packed interview. I'm really excited to say have listeners listen to it and give their feedback. But let's speak a little more about you creating content, and you doing that in a way that helps people remember you. So you've mentioned it a couple of times earlier that you've been writing a lot, and you have like a professional brand around you, and you create posts, you write articles. So do you have any tips for people who aren't used to doing that, but who would like to build like a thought leadership by posting on LinkedIn, let's say?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first step is to have a differentiated positioning strategy. And that's an easy thing to say, but a hard thing to do. I actually have a whole series of videos on how to do this, but starts by understanding your customer, that ideal customer profile that's sort of firmographic, but that also gets into what's the business context that brought them to market to solve this problem. Then it's the sort of customer personas or avatars of actual people that are decision makers. What do they care about? What does their life look like? From the perspective of what's their business win for solving this problem? What's their personal win for solving this problem? Really understanding that, looking at the competitive landscape. How are you different than what other people do, and the way that other people approach it? And what proof points do you have that you're actually different or better, or sort of well respected? And so build out these points of parity where you're similar to the marketplace, these points of differentiation where you're different than the marketplace, and where you have the strongest reasons to believe or proof points. Bring all of that together into a positioning strategy. Then that positioning strategy is your North Star that guides everything you ever create. And typically, through the process of building out this positioning strategy, you'll come up with a point of view that is different than the marketplace. Like, you don't need more leads. You need the right leads. You don't need growth hacks. You need systems. Like, that's my differentiation, and that's what I put out into the marketplace. And so everyone else is talking about one thing. If you talk about something different, that stands out and can get the attention of your audience. And then if they see this consistency of message from the very first, post that they see, to the follow-up emails that they get, to the sales presentation, to even the results delivery, there's all this consistent through line that aligns with this differentiated positioning strategy. That's how you really build the trust and the credibility with them that makes them want to do business with you and have an ongoing, kind of positioning. Russell Brunson talks about writing in the prolific zone, which is not what the mainstream folks are saying, and not what the crazies over here on the fringe are saying either, but something that's kind of in between. And I think that's a little bit true. But I would think about it more from the perspective of, what is it about your vision for your industry and your business that's different than other folks, where you have proof that difference matters? Talk about that. And then that's how you really create differentiated positioning that creates awareness while generating demand. And that's really what you want to do.
Like this. Thank you for sharing this. And how do you like? What's your process there? Because you mentioned this earlier that one of the things that you're doing right now mindfully is being on podcasts like this one. So, what else are you doing in order to create this sort of an impact?
Sure. It's all the same things. It started by really understanding what are the customers that I want to work with, both from a firmographic and then an individual perspective. How is my approach to solving their problems different from what other people have to say in the marketplace and other people's approaches? What proof points do I have of that? Now, what content can I create that, sort of really reinforces that? And so talking about my approach to working with clients on a podcast like this helps someone see, oh, he's different. He's not out there talking about a growth hack or a way to game an algorithm to get free traffic, which is what a lot of other people are out talking about right now. They've got the latest silver bullet. That's not my approach. And if they're hunting for the latest silver bullet, I don't want them to call me because that's not who I really add value to. And but there are other people out there that have tried some of these latest silver bullets, and they've seen, man, it really didn't pan out. It wasn't worth the effort. I really believe that I need systems built on marketing strategy, and that's what I want to build in my business. So those people will call me, and that's who I want to work with.
I love this. That's like I have so many more questions, Mark, but we're almost at time, and I would like to respect your time. So this brings us to the end of the interview. Thank you so much for sharing all of these amazing pieces of insight with us, Mark, today. It has been such a pleasure to hear how you think about marketing, how you think about getting leads, and how you're applying these lessons that you've put out and shared with the world into your own life. So this was such a fascinating conversation. Thanks again.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. And for all the links and all the resources that you have mentioned, we will talk about it and put it out in the show notes after the show. So if there's one link that you would once again want people to visit to learn more about you and to connect with you, where should you send them?
Yeah, modernrevenuestrategies.com.
Got it. All right.
And then again, free download, they can get a copy of the book.
Yeah. So all of these will be linked in the show notes. All right.
Oh, and if you can't find any of the businesses that I referenced, let me know. I'll find them and send them to you. I'm happy to sort of share that. And then I also would be happy to come back and talk more if there are topics that you want to explore deeper.
Of course, that's very generous of you, Mark. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you. All right, bye.